I do believe there was some kind of historical figure about Muhammad, but I don't believe you could ever defend his existence. I believe that I might be able to, and Robert and I are going to have our own debate on that maybe later this week. But I'm certainly willing to put your methodology to the test tonight to see if you see what you can prove. Now, for our viewers, when historians approach a question like the existence of some ancient figure, they don't just assume, well, it's absurd to question that. No, they're looking for evidence. And when we look at the evidence for Muhammad's existence, or the existence of any early figure from many centuries ago, historians are looking mainly for early sources. They want early sources, sources that come soon after the events they report. They'd like to have multiple sources. So, you could have one source, that might be some evidence, but it's much better to have multiple sources. And they'd like these sources to be independent. In other words, one source isn't just quoting some other source. That wouldn't be independent sources. They're looking for several sources that aren't just drawing from one another. And so when you put that together, historians are looking for multiple independent early sources. And my friends, Anjem and Omar, you don't have that. You don't have anything close to that. All you have are late sources, most of which come from a couple centuries after the time of Muhammad, and which were written during a time when your Muslim brothers were cooking up stories like they were cooking up kebabs. So we have to look at this, and from a historical perspective, we have to look at that and say, wow, there's something strange going on here. So the real problem that you have, the central problem that you have with your knowledge of Muhammad is that as time goes on, your knowledge of Muhammad seems to increase. And that's the opposite of the way things normally go. Normally, the people who know the most about someone are the people who are there, and then the next generation doesn't know as much because they only know what that earlier generation recorded. And then the next generation and the following generations, they can't know more than that first generation. And what we have in your sources is, we go to the first century of Islam, we have virtually nothing about Muhammad during that time. Then it's in later centuries where we start getting all these stories about Muhammad. So basically, if you go back to the first several generations of Islam, if you go back to that first century, it's Muhammad, who's he? That's what history tells us. Then the following century, a century later, then we have enough to fill a biography like Ibn Ishaq. And then the following century after that, then we start having multiple, massive, multi-volume collections of ahadith. So now what you have is your knowledge of Muhammad is rapidly expanding, and that's the opposite of what we would expect if Muhammad were this historical figure that you believe in. If you were correct, if your hypothesis, if your view were correct, what would we expect? We'd expect at least many mentions of Muhammad during the first century when Muslims were going out conquering and so on, but that's not what we have. And so you haven't given us any historical evidence at all for Muhammad's existence. We want to know, what are your first century sources that talk about the existence of Muhammad and tell us about his life? We'd love to see them. The only real argument you've given is this challenge of the Quran based on Surah 223. Produce a chapter like it. Produce a chapter like it and call on your witnesses if you don't believe this is the word of God. Well, I don't believe that this is the word of God, so let me meet the challenge real quick. I'll read Surah 109, one of the short ones. This would be one of the easy ones. Say, O unbelievers, I do not serve that which you serve, nor do you serve him whom I serve, nor am I going to serve that which you serve, nor are you going to serve him whom I serve. You shall have your religion, and I shall have my religion. To viewers who aren't familiar with the Quran, that's an entire chapter of the Quran right there. And according to our opponents tonight, that no one could produce a chapter like that. Well, I'd like to take a crack at the challenge. I jotted it down as soon as you mentioned it. Here's my chapter like it. Say, O Muslims, Robert does not believe Muhammad existed, but you do believe Muhammad existed. Nor is Robert going to believe that Muhammad existed, nor are you going to believe that Muhammad didn't exist. To you be your belief, and to Robert be his belief. Now, I've given you a surah like it. I have to call on my witnesses. Robert, will you bear witness that that is like what we read in the Quran?
David, I bear witness that that is like the Quran.
We have met the Quran's challenge. Now, what are you going to say? You're going to say, well, it has to be in Arabic, or that it has to be a good Muslim witness? That's what you want, isn't it? That's what you want. It has to be a good Muslim witness. And that's why this challenge is absolutely absurd. You're saying, here's our challenge, and we have to agree. We have to agree on it. Well, fine. I'll say it. You have to agree with me. You have to bring me a chapter that I agree could not be surpassed by anyone. And until you do, the Quran is false. It's a book of Satan or something like that. And you have to bring me something that I agree with to prove me wrong. So it's an absurd challenge. Robert already pointed that out. Now, Anjem referred to the meticulous verification process of the hadith. What was the purpose, Anjem, for this meticulous verification process? The reason for it was there were so many, literally hundreds of thousands of false stories about Muhammad going around. Someone tried to come up with a method. Now, why is this methodology absurd? For those of you who don't understand the Quran, I mean the hadith, the isnad criticism method, it's I got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so. And if we like all the names on that list and we think they're all good Muslims, well, then we conclude that it's a reliable hadith. And why is that? Why is that absurd? Because I could write down an isnad right now, going back to Ibn Abbas, and show you that my hadith is a correct one. I'm going to come up with a hadith for you, Anjem.
Okay, David. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, that's a good rebuttal there. We have 6 minutes have passed now. We have another 6 minutes. We reset the clock. Anjem and Omar, you can go ahead and start anytime.
You see, I think I was hearing, you see, what he's saying, you know, for the last maybe few minutes.
We have a bit of an echo.
You can hear me.
Omar, we have a bit of an echo, so perhaps we could try to correct that.
Thank you for choosing Noble Talk.
Yes, I can hear you, no problem. Let me explain things. You see, it's easy for you to talk in subjective way till the morning. But the questions, the stick of Muise, that his own sign of his miracle, does not exist. We don't have it today. Where is the stick of Muise? Where is the one which is Jesus? He touched and he become. You see, he rise from his graves. Where is, the fire of Abraham? Where is the flood of Noah? So I'm talking about all those miracles which is really has been performed by God, which is really proven that the messengers are the messenger of God, has been chosen by God, are not exist. But the miracles of the final messenger Muhammad, you see, is exist. For me, is irrelevant now how he's been combined, how being transmitted, does the people write it in the time or not? All this is irrelevant, unimportant, insignificant for me. Wasting of time, you see, yourself talking about these issues. I got front of me books, no one can do something similar. Obviously, what Robinson he tried to do, that he makes one chapter is "Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun." I can say, "Oh Omar, I do not take what said." All this really is just pathetic, because he does not even speak it in Arabic. He speaks it in English. In English, he himself, it is not the same. So we're talking about, tell me, bring one chapters like "Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun, la a'budu ma ta'budun, ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين." Bring something similar in Arabic language, not to say to me, "Oh Omar, I do not really take what you take, you don't take." That is really pathetic and is very shallow. So plus, I'm telling you, Christians Arab never use your own argument. By the way, you people in the West, there's no prophet come to you. You really have no prophet. The only prophets and messengers are really come to you. It is really the final messengers. His followers come to you. Otherwise, even Jesus born in my own countries. You see, we have Jesus here in Nazareth, in Asham regions, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, Noah, all of them, Muhammad, in that area, in the Middle East and in the Arab Gulf countries. But in Europe, in America, you got Madonna and Michael Jacksons, and you got your own prophets, etc. So you got Obama. But the questions, don't argue with things really you do not understand, or what you want to do. You got Quran, exists. Go read it. And go check it and bring challenge and debate and beat the challenge. In the Quran, after I believe that no man has really finger on it, that's what make me believe in Abraham. What make me believe that Jesus was exist. What make me believe even that is Noah was exist, or Adam and Eve was exist. So because it is in the Quran, has mentioned to me the chapter Muhammad. You see, and that's called Surah Muhammad, has mentioned to me Muhammadun Rasulullah. So for me, I don't want to go to all this historical things, because as you said, it's subjective, and some people will say it does not exist, some people say it exist, but that Quran is exist, and that Quran is a challenge all mankind and the jinn like you, even those who have really speak Arabic, Christians and good Arabic teachers, Jews, mean the Jewish communities and the Christian communities, no one said what you said. So they are just like, they are listening to you, and they are really know the Arami, what called radios and televisions, are a bunch of people who are just fabricating stories. Now, what you said, You said now there's nobody marry women on the age or marry girls or marry children. Now there's all this story you was attacking Muslim for years about it, that you said Muhammad he married to young daughters or to baby. Does not exist. Mean what? Mean everything you try to fabricate about him was he fabricate stories about person is fictions. So you can see even from your own argument you show the contradictions. You make yourself really a laughing stock in front of everybody's by just bringing the ideas that did he ever exist? Yes, indeed he exists. And the proof for that is Al-Quran. You did not beat the challenge. You just really try to fool the people who are listening to you. Even if I want to say it myself in Arabic, in other way, to maintain the meanings. The meanings, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Say Muhammad, O kafirs. Bring me another wording. Say Muhammad, O kafir in Arabic. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. What do you want to use? You cannot use any Arab words. But give me any other Arabic text, I can do something similar. Any Arabic books, I can do something similar. Any stories in Arabic, I can do something similar. I can maintain the grammars, the meanings, the forms, the style, but no way for any chapter in the Quran. And try get help from your own Christian friends in Lebanon or in Syria or in Damascus. They will say the same things. So take it or leave it.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and we have one last 6-minute segment here, another rebuttal number 2 from our Christian gentleman here, and we've reset the clock. Go right ahead.
Okay, in the first place, I'd like to speak up as a Melkite Christian in defense of the Christian Arabs. Actually, at the website that I referenced earlier, suralikeit.com, the challenge to produce a surah like it is taken up in flawless Quranic Arabic, and any Arabic speaker, however fluent, can see it and can read it and can hear how the music of it, the rhythm of it, the sound of it is very much like that of the Quran. But again, this is a subjective measurement. And I will say it's like it all night long, and Sheikh Omar and Anjem will say, no, it's not like it at all. And that just shows that the whole exercise is useless. There is no way that anybody could produce anything that would ever satisfy this challenge, because it's built in to be self-refuting. They will never accept that anything is like it, and then they can't bring that forth as some kind of proof. Now, Anjem said, since the gentlemen on the other side of this debate are basing their whole argument on the Quran, let's talk about the Quran. Anjem said nobody has another version of the Quran. Apparently he's forgotten that while the primary version out of Cairo that was printed in 1924, from which most Qurans are taken nowadays, that is from the Hafs manuscript tradition. But there is another manuscript tradition that is accepted by Muslims, mainly in Western and Northwest Africa, and that's the Warsh tradition. And there are very small but significant differences between the two. For example, in Quran chapter 2, verse 125, the Hafs text has Allah commanding the Muslims, take the station of Abraham as a place of prayer. But the Warsh tradition does not have the imperative in that, and it says, they have taken the station of Abraham as a place of prayer. Now you might say, well, that's a small difference, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, any tiny difference matters, because Anjem said there's no variation in the text of the Quran. There are no variants, but the Muslims themselves have variants. In the Hafs text, the Quran chapter 3, verse 13 says that at the Battle of Badr, there was one army fighting in the way of Allah and another disbelieving, whom they saw as twice their number, clearly with their very eyes. But in the Warsh text, the pronoun is different, so that the text reads, whom you saw as twice their number, clearly with your very eyes, rather than whom they saw. And in the Hafs Quran, chapter 3, verse 146 says, and with how many a prophet have there been a number of devoted men who fought? But the Warsh asks a very different question. It says, with how many a prophet have there been a number of devoted men who were killed? Not who fought, but who were killed. Small variations? Certainly. Do they change the meaning or the doctrine of Islam or anything of that kind? Of course not. But the whole Muslim argument here is that the Quran is miraculous, has no variants. Actually, there are very many variants. He also mentioned, Anjem mentioned Zayd ibn Thabit, who is supposed to have collected the Quran together. Now, Islam teaches, there are many hadith that say that Zayd himself was a hafiz, that is, somebody who had memorized the entire Quran text. And yet, he said that when he was asked by Umar and later by Uthman to collect the Quran together, he originally did not want to, and he felt like it was the worst job that he'd been given. It was a terrible burden. Now look, if he was a Hafiz, why couldn't he have just sat down and written it out? Why did he have to go around asking people what it said? And then there's a tradition in which Khuzaimah gave him the last 2 verses of Surah At-Tawbah, the 9th chapter of the Quran, which would have been lost if Khuzaimah hadn't popped up at this right moment.